Graham, you said you were 65. I'm 65 and 3/4. It means that I'm not only deaf, I'm also dumb, because I have a sore throat. And in spite of that, the organizers insisted that I should come, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that. But I will try to be able to speak during 10 minutes, but I do not guarantee it. I have no formal presentation. I also said I had no time for it, so I'm just here as a tourist. I give you a few impressions of what I seen and heard. First, let me congratulate Graham for this presentation so lively with so many examples. Well, not so many, mostly focused on sub-Saharan, but I read your paper. I said you didn't prepare, but I read your paper, and there are many other examples from East Asia, Vietnam, and some like Latin America. I'm not going to compete with you in these countries, which I know very little, but I have a few other examples. For example, Morocco, which is the closest emerging country to Barcelona, after all. The French philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal had a famous sentence: truth on this side of the Pyrenees Mountains, lie on the other side. For example, France has 95% fixed interest rate mortgages. This is not true in Spain. We are not going to engage in a comparison between Paris and Barcelona. We should include soccer, and I don't want to do that today. But you already say that, Mr. Sorolla, that it means also that this sentence means that you cannot have a and John Dowling too, one-size-fits-all policy for all very different countries. And so starting from that, I will have some criticism about these do's and don'ts and many examples of countries who didn't follow them at all. Of course, I will speak about rental, although I think most people agree on what should be said about rental. Let me first talk about demand side and supply subsidy. For the World Bank, demand side is very good and supply side is a terrible thing. Everyone does not agree with that. First, demand side in the form of vouchers or housing benefits, as John Dowling said, will not work if you are unable to assess people's income. This is a problem we are facing in Egypt. We are going to work on this next week with Maria. The other issue is that you can, even if you have the best voucher system in the world, you have people holding their voucher, but there may be no supply that correspond to their needs, because developers and builders will focus on the higher range, and they will not build low-cost units or low-size units that you may wish. This may be a reason why the Moroccan government, when the World Bank, I was with the World Bank around 2000, we were advertising the Chilean model of upfront subsidies, demand-side upfront subsidies, which work very well in Chile at this time, but the Moroccan didn't want it. Why? They said, what will people do is that they are going to catch the subsidy and they resell the unit and go back to their slum. It may be, in some cases, I'm not to be too general about this, maybe easier to keep under control a few dozen developers than some million of people. So what happened in Morocco is that they gave big tax incentives to developers who would commit themselves to produce units with a maximum price and a maximum size. Not income tested, it's just what we call the self-targeting, given the size of the units. We have started, I think, an evaluation of this system, which have helped produce a lot of units. The problem is that as there is no policy towards middle-income people, what would they do? They would buy 2 or 3 units and make their own apartment by putting together this kind of units. So what, on the supply side, I had recently a discussion in Seychelles, which is a tiny country. You cannot advertise too much tiny on relatively rich compared to other sub-Saharan countries. We had a discussion how to have developers work for low and middle income people. Should we use carrot and sticks? They try to engage a cross-subsidy system, but cross-subsidy is not transparent at all, and clearly the first program they showed me, there was some loss between the subsidy, government-subsidized lands, but a part of it remained clearly in the hand of the developers. So the government is considered to use sticks. Can you use sticks with developers? Yes, we do it in France, because we have a famous law that says that we need 25% of units in the stock consisted of rental social housing. So this is an obligation from the government to the municipalities. So what do the municipalities do? They ask, well, they give only the permits to developers, provided that they sell a proportion between 25, sometimes 40% of their units to social housing providers. Is this a good thing? I don't, not necessarily, but this is this issue of carrot and sticks, which perhaps Maria will continue. I don't want to cut the grass under your feet. You probably couldn't have the same discussion about mortgage lending, community reinvestment tax and this kind of thing. I'm not going to deal with mortgage issues. Rental, yes, of course, finance is an important thing, but before that, the first thing to do is to ensure that you have balance, rights and duties between landlords and tenants. Of course, the power is usually between the hands of the landlords. So what do government do? They do the contrary. They block rents, they install law that protects tenants, and in the end, there are no investors. There have been all over the world many cases of rent controls. You know, of course, this famous sentence. I don't remember the name of the person, Swedish, I think, who wrote that. There are two ways to destroy a city, air bombing and rent control. They had long-time rent control in Egypt. There was a new law in '96 which reduced the control, but still it did not completely degrandfather the law. That there are same units with tenants who are paying peanuts and others who are paying something like market price. So this is not fair and makes the market not work very well, because people have not forgotten the time of rent control, and they always think that it might come back tomorrow. The government, the new Minister of Housing, seems to be willing to tackle the issue and change the law a little bit. But you know that this is a way to lose elections, to touch this kind of law. But this man seems to be, he told us, in fact, that he is being bored by being a Minister of Housing. So he doesn't fear, he's not in fear to lose his job, so he's ready to tackle the issue. So you see how difficult it is. It's often embedded in the civil code, so it's very difficult to change this type of law and people's mentality, because it's printed, this kind of thing is printed in people's mind for a long time. So the great problem with the rental is that, of course, it's seen as a good rental of formal units, of course, is seen as a good solution for the lowest brackets, maybe not the poorest among the poorest, but for the rather poor people with at least a regular income. But the problem is that there are no investors and there is no supply and no demand. No demand, I mean, because if you have regular income, you will try to get a mortgage and become an owner. And as there are very few, most tenants are tenants by default and tenants by choice, and there are very few people who want to invest in formal housing to house this kind of households. So what's left? Less what everyone hates, refuses, it's public housing. One thing is very clear with public housing, we know why it fails. So we can correct this a few things. One thing is that it's 100% upfront investment from governments, and very few are able to do this on a large scale. Well, this we cannot help many governments to for their financial, for their budget issues. But the other thing is that people will not pay rent because it's government, so there is no serious rent collection and there is no maintenance. But for this, we have solutions. It's absolutely indispensable that in any form of public housing, the management should not remain in the hands of public authority, should there be national or local. It must be given to the private sector, either to private manager or best, of course, if we are dealing with low-income people, delegated to non-governmental organizations who are accustomed to deal with low-income people and treat them not only as consumers, but consumer and social cases, which of course government and private sector will not do. I'm frightened by the red card, no?
You're close to it.
I'm close to it, so I want to come to the last point. One, I think, an important missing do, which is more important in the context. If you want to extend mortgage lending, even if you are not going to reach the lower quartile, I think people need information, well, market information to know what the prices are, of course, but perhaps more important than market information is consumer education. Someone, I'm sure he was from England, but I don't remember his name, said one day 50% of people do not understand what 50% means. This may be a little exaggerated, but not so much. This means how can you understand how amortization of mortgage loan works? How can you understand that you have simply to repay a loan? What is the capital, what is the interest, what is the mortgage registration, and so on. So if you have not received minimum education, this is also true in the field of rental housing. People should learn that you have to pay your rent, because behind that there's an investment and so on. So this, I think this item concerning consumer education is a very important thing which I would add to the list of the do. It's not the most costly thing that we can ask from government. It's not as costly as developing public rental housing with 100% subsidies, for example.